As you lie in bed, a pint of chocolate ice cream in one hand and a TV remote in the other, your dreams of being a pioneer in this world die. Pioneer paralysis shows up like Glinda, the good witch in The Wizard of Oz. She gently takes the spoon out of your hand and does a little tap tap on your forehead. Not hard, light, like Glinda did for Dorothy. Pioneer paralysis calms you down and then gives you the sweet little permission to return to your warm, cozy comfort zone. Your version of Kansas. Hey, Nicole, what do you get when a former corporate CEO and a do-gooding executive walk into a recording studio?
Well, Erin, nothing, because the two of us are usually on my couch or Zoom, because wine.
You get a podcast created for Gen X women who are bought into the corporate world but fed up with the BS.
I know. It's how to thrive the 9 to 5 or 6 or 7.
It's career therapy. It's comedy. It's definitely full-on authenticity. Basically, we give you tangible strategies to rise in your career without compromising everything else.
Because work doesn't have to suck.
Hey guys, it's Erin, and I'm sitting in my basement. Probably a silly time to do it. I just finished working out, but I am just so psyched up. This whole week, I've been prepping to get the 50% rule out there ready for pre-order. And by the time you listen to this, it will be out. And I thought before I get humming on my day, I would just stop and talk to you guys and authentically sort of give you the scoop on why I keep saying I'm obsessed with this book. Like my first book, I was excited to get it out, right? This one, it's just so weird how much I freaking love. It's not even just the book, it's the rule itself. I wouldn't have written a book about one silly little rule if I wasn't so excited about it. But so I thought I would just give you the authentic inside scoop on how this all came about and why I feel just so freaking lit up about this book and this rule being out there. And then I also recorded previously, so I'm not heavy breathed, a sample from one of the chapters, Sleeprunning Syndrome. So you can get a little taste of the book and what it's all about, and also just see if you have sleep-running syndrome, which you probably do. We all do. But so yeah, how did the book come about? So, it's interesting because when I first started Be Authentic Inc. and like shot out of a rocket going around talking about authenticity and how it can be, your strategic advantage, your secret weapon to success, how it was something tangible and et cetera. And I say a shot out of cannon because, I started doing keynotes right away. I sort of accidentally fell into my first one. And then I, applied for TEDx while I was also writing my book. And within the first couple of years, I had done a TED Talk. I had written my first book, You Do You-ish. I'd been out there talking. And don't get me wrong, it was not all success. It was a lot of wasted money, a lot of lost opportunities, a lot of days where I was like, crap, I can't afford, $6 a ride of flat fries right now. But, I was confident in my message. I still am. I'm like, feel so ridiculously blessed to have been sort of downloaded this unique angle on authenticity and this sincere passion for it. And 5.5 years later, I'm still on stages talking about it and working with companies to implement it. But meanwhile, I was learning myself because I was new to entrepreneurship and new to sort of, at the time I was doing a lot of, B2C work. I spent my entire career in big B to big P transactions. And so just understanding everything from like creating email lists to, engaging people with social media to how do you write a book and how do you really deliver the best keynote and how do you build your keynote speaking business. And so I was fully entrenched. While I was teaching other people, I was investing the shit out of myself. I was soaking in all the information. And trust me, there is so much information out there, which, is a blessing and a curse. And I talk about that a little bit in the book, right? There's so many playbooks and masterminds and secrets to success. So I was doing that and I I remember the moment I was in Nashville. I was part of a group for 3 years I invested in called Brand Builders Group. And we met in person in Nashville, and it was a session. It was a 2-day session, deep dive. I think it might have been in just the basic building your brand. We're sitting there on the second day, and these guys are good. I mean, they know their stuff, and they, literally would hand you like an 85-page quote unquote playbook, right? It was a PowerPoint with all the things they were teaching and things you could do to build your brand and build your business. And I should have felt like, oh my gosh, thank you. Like, let's just start checking the boxes and, let's fucking go. But I wasn't. I was like paralyzed and anxious and uninspired to like move. And I know myself, like I figured out that I am the kind of person that has to find that inspiration. I am not just a like, well, if I just got to dig deep and have discipline. Like, I know that that's a message out there and that works for some people. Does not work for me. And so as I sat there, I thought about this rule, and this rule, I actually talk about it in You Do You-ish briefly, but in a different context. And people always remember it. Yeah, I had for years been coaching people that if they were looking for their next assignment and they really wanted to thrive and grow and get promoted, like you have to be 50% uncomfortable. And sort of, it's called it the 50% rule. And it was this concept that like every job, if it's not, 50% is stuff you already know, whether it's subject matter, expertise, or, it's sales and you know how to do sales. But like half of it needs to be uncomfortable. You're not going to grow. You're not going to find yourself in those exponentially increased positions like you want. And so I was sitting there and I sort of like had a tag sale with myself on an old rule. And I was like, well, what if you just 50% ruled everything they're telling you? And what I meant by that to myself was that, like, look, only take about half of what they're telling you. And it's okay to throw out the half that feels icky, that feels like an exercise in futility. Maybe it feels like, oh, that might have worked before, but I'm guessing that won't work with people anymore. It's sort of a stale strategy, or it's just not me. But then what if I also get creative and really understand, okay, what's the intent of some of these strategies? What if I come up with my own? What if I like think about things that have worked for others, or get creative and sort of use my own sort of wacky brain? And as soon as I did that, it was like this huge weight was lifted off my shoulders. And I was just like, oh, okay, let's go. And it's funny when I tell people kind of the origin of the role that, this is the basics, which clearly not enough to write a book about. So there's much, much more, as you might imagine. People are always like, oh, well, yeah. Oh, I love that. I love that. That's what I do. I strive to do that. And I'm sort of like, yeah, no, you don't. I mean, you do. Don't get me wrong. You do in certain occasions, but I can guarantee that you miss the opportunity to apply the 50% rule in probably 95% of your life. And I can tell you that with assurance, because along my journey, I kept not applying it. And even while I was writing the book, I had shit going on that it took me like a month. And then I was like, you dumbass, why don't you 50% rule it? So anyways, that's how the rule was born. And then, just sort of, I would, there were several times it would come up. Then I took another course, and I tell the story in the book how like we did all this recording and stuff. And that night I laid in bed and I was like, well, that was good. And like, oh shit, like I'm not a good person. I don't like to do things good. I like to do things great. And, sort of realized I needed to 50% roll it. And so I tell the story about that. But then what happened was organically, it just kept shooting out of my mouth. So whether it was a formal coaching client, it was a friend or colleague, and something would come up and I was like, why don't you 50% roll it? And they'd be like, huh? I'm like, oh, okay, let me explain what it is. And I would just watch these light bulbs go off, not just the permission to throw out the half, but the permission to add in the creativity and do their own thing and think about it differently. And, it's not a concept that's new, but it's a framework. There's a trigger to it. There's something so amazing. And so it's so much so that like my team, we would be on team meetings constantly. We still are. We're like, well, how would we 50% rule it? And it just click something in our brain. So again, cool, but not really enough to fill up, 50, 60,000 words on pages about. But then what happened is I started kind of seeing it everywhere. Meaning I would watch a documentary, I would read a book, I would see a story on the news. And I started to see, I was like, oh my gosh, they 50% ruled it, like famous people. So I started to see it with Hamilton. We went to Hamilton the first time. I was like, oh, 50% ruled it. And that's not just something that probably gave him this permission to get over his shit. It actually is what made it so successful, because there are these principles that happen when 50% rule happens. One of the principles that comes out is that juxtapositions create joyful jolts. That's a pithy way of saying it. And in the book, I have, I don't know, I think 60 some quotes like that, where you really can understand the power of 50%. So I saw it with him. I saw it with Weird Al Yankovic. I saw it with John Madden and Whitney Houston and Shopify and the Volkswagen bug campaign back in the 50s. And so I started to see that this rule wasn't just a mantra, a self-help thing. It was actually a strategy that, as I like to say, helps people go really from underdog to unmatched. It puts you in a league of your own. It helps you stand out. It creates a jolt to other people's brains. It makes you not have to win by working harder and being better than the competition, which, fuck, just hate that. It's no fun. It actually helps you win by standing out, by being different, by giving something fresh and new, by jolting people's brains, by waking them up. And that's when I was like, okay, I think this is a book. So I walked around for at least a year with a note thing on my phone. And every time I would see something or think of something, I would write it down. And once that note became just unruly, I knew it was time to start thinking about the book. And that's a whole nother story. I tell that in the book about how I sort of landed a publishing deal, which, I in the video I do for the book too, I talk about how I shouldn't have. But why did I land it? Well, 50% rule. So why am I so obsessed? So, well, I'm so obsessed because with this rule, I've just watched it for so many people, not just me, like unlock things, and people keep saying it. And we've actually had a book team that's met for almost a year and a half now, supporting the book and its launch and helping with creativity and feedback and reviews. And it just becomes this common language, this thing that excites people, that helps them win. So the rule itself, like, I just can't wait for as many people as possibly walking around just looking at each other and like, well, why don't you 50% rule it? Or I 50% ruled it. Or it's just so powerful. Hey, did you know that August 16th is National Roller Coaster Day? It's so ridiculous. I freaking hate roller coasters. So whatever. But it is also National Authenticity Day on August 16th. And here's the coolest thing about National Authenticity Day. Besides, us being obsessed with authenticity, you can actually make someone else's day. And you don't get to do this very often. Every year, we, The Authentic Inc., the company that's behind this podcast, sponsors what we call the National Authenticity Awards. And it culminates on National Authenticity Day. And that's just when we recognize leaders, everyday workers, and companies that inspire the crap out of others with their authenticity. And you should totally nominate someone. I mean, can you think of a better way to give back to someone you work with than putting them on the grandstand of the authenticity goats? It's cheap, it's free, and it's such a great thing to do. So to nominate someone or a company, it's easy peasy. You just go to nationalauthenticity.day.com and click on the link in the upper left-hand corner. Nominate them now. So stop listening, go nominate. I'm also kind of obsessed because when I wrote this book, just like any book, there's the same you do you-ish. And, I sort of say you think that then write, but it's really you write so you can know. And what I mean by that is, you have to have sort of an outline in your brain. You have to have a collection of stories. That's sort of how I do it. I start to collect these stories and then I start to put them into a framework. What lessons do they tell? How does that sort of carry up to a book outline and a cadence and a rhythm? But really, anytime I started to write down a chapter, and most of the time I start with a story, whether it's my story, somebody else's story, a famous person's story. And then that story just starts telling me so many interesting things and lessons. And I have to admit, I'm also, yeah, I'm sure Malcolm Gladwell's not like this. I mean, he probably has a team of like 30 researchers, but what I typically do is I dig into the story a little bit real time. So, for example, I knew a little bit about Weird Al and I knew a little bit about Lin-Manuel Miranda of Hamilton. But then when I really get deep into those chapters, I'm like rabbit holing it for all the information. I mean, and not just on the internet. I listened to the book about Hamilton. I think I listened to it twice. And then I start to get into like YouTube videos and I start to find these things and connections. There's such an interesting, mind-blowing connection between two of what I call the 50% rulers and the stories I tell in this book that I didn't uncover until I was writing the book. And so fun. And I also just feel like with this second book, I feel like the first book gave me so much permission to write like I talk, to be sassy, to be tough love, to be ridiculous with my metaphors. And I say it gave me permission because of the feedback I've gotten from so many people and from the reviews. And so I went into this book, quite honestly, with confidence in my writing and confidence to just let shit go and have fun. And I have to tell you, I mean, I hope you find it funny. There were so many times I was laughing out loud at the shit that just like came out of my mouth. And trust me, there were a few times where my editor, I mean, she was great. I absolutely adore her. But there were a few times where she pulled back on something. I was like, oh, no, that that ridiculousness stays in because that's just part of the rhythm. And that's my overall goal. My number one goal with every book I write, because this isn't the last, is to make you want to read it. Not because, oh, I need to know this information to be a good leader, to grow my business. You want to read it because it's fun. You want to read it like it's a nonfiction book, right? Like you don't read those because you have to. You read those because you're like, I want to go on the journey. I want to find out what happens. I want to enjoy the experience. And that's my goal because I'm not the discipline queen. I am not the person that wants anybody to pick up my book and be like, oh, I got to get through this. Like, fuck that. Life's too short. There's too many books out there. So I'm really proud of the roller coaster this book took me on, that will take you on. It's through ridiculousness. It's through some really powerful shit. This is great stories. The uncovering that we do almost real time in the book. And, I just really hope people read it to the end because it just all culminates in this just absolutely tremendous story at the end about Sam Balto and his bike bus. And not at all what I thought I was going to uncover when I was researching that. Some lessons that are just so cool. And so, I don't know, not deep in the sense of like, nor like how you think of deep, but deep in the sense of like really peeled back the layers of the onion and found some really, really incredible, inspiring stories behind his as well. So, all right, I've talked too much. I'm going to talk again. I am going to tee up this section of, this is chapter 2, I think, I'm pretty sure it is, called Sleeprunning Syndrome. And this is just an excerpt from it. And it's one of the things that I think we try to solve. I also talk later in the book about sameness syndrome, which really is sleep running syndrome at scale. I wish I would have wrote that in the book. That's pretty good. But this is just a little sample. See if you have sleep running syndrome. And I really do hope you'll check out the book. It's out for pre-order, which pre-order is this sort of weird thing. I'm sort of like, why in the hell would somebody want to like pay for a book now? They're not going to get until October 1st. But here's the reason you would do it. Now, there's a couple. One, you like free shit. So I am holding a contest. If you order the book, pre-order it before the end of July 2024, You send an email to hello@beauthentic.inc.com and just say, hey, it's so-and-so. I ordered a book or I ordered 5 books and whatever it is. We're not going to ask for proof and all that crap. And for every book you order, we're going to enter your name once for every book into a drawing. And I'm going to give away either a virtual keynote or 6 months of private coaching, your choice, to one person that goes into that drawing, which is both of them are around a $10,000 value. So that's one. The second is you just like to help people and, help me not look like a loser. Part of the reason I do pre-orders is momentum matters, right? Momentum is everything. And so if they can start to see that people actually are interested in this book, want this book, it helps, helps algorithms. It helps me not look like a loser. It hopefully helps the buzz and other people. I mean, I guess also this is probably more for me, but it also helps if you have a bad memory and you don't want to remember. Oh, and I forgot to mention, coincidentally, the other reason you might do it is to get us both a birthday present. So on Saturday of last week, the day after we launched pre-sales, I actually turned 50, which is pretty freaking cool. I wish I could say I planned to have a 50% rule book launch when I was 50. Well, I did about 3 or 4 months ago when I realized the two were kind of colliding, but the book has nothing to do with really being 50. But I can't imagine being 50 without the 50% rule. So if you want to get me a present and get yourself a present, we both get presents at the same time, you might want to pre-order the book too. Okay, without further ado, here's a snippet from the 50% rule. While symptoms vary from person to person, there's a common path, a typical order of operations that will turn what feels like a common cold into an uncontrollable fever. The first thing that usually pops up is comparison cramps. You notice what someone else is doing and think that they're doing it better, with more ease or with an authority you don't think you have. You compare yourself to peers at work, people on Instagram, and your friends. You compare your business to others. You compare how your meeting went versus another meeting you attended later that day. You compare yourself to your best friends and complete strangers. And you never adjust your comparisons. You compare your 3-month struggle to people's 10-year journey. You compare your stock price to that of a company that is 20 times bigger. You compare the cleanliness of your house to your stay-at-home friend's house. Every day, you're comparing. Then you think you know the cure to your annoying little comparison cramps. Copy others. If you just start copying what others are doing, those cramps will magically disappear. Because that's what you're taught to do, right? Since you were a baby and watched your parents walk and talk, you've been copying. You've been taught that to succeed, you should just emulate those around you. But because you're running so damn fast, copying, the next thing you know, you have copying calluses everywhere. They hurt. They slow you down. They make you miserable. And you think, I know how to get rid of these. I just need a bit more discipline and I will become just as awesome as X person is. You read productivity books, write and rewrite your to-do list, block your calendar. You get Atomic, deploy 7 highly effective habits, and eat some frogs. You might even go all ninja and start using the work in timed intervals, Pomodoro technique. Because that must be the difference between you and them. They have discipline. You don't. But gosh darn it, you will transform yourself into the Taskinator. You think, let's go. Then, one morning, you go to bed all Pomodorable and wake up Pomodone. Instead of being ready for another day of taskinating, you can't even get 1 foot out of bed. You're exhausted and ache all over. You gather just enough strength to telemed with your doctor, who promptly tells you it must be perfection pain, a common symptom of sleeprunning syndrome. She tells you that when you work that hard, focusing on comparing and copying, it's common to come down with perfection pain. She prescribes you a pill and explains that it should help wipe away your pain. You take the pill and decide to take the day to rest in bed. You're happy the doctor seems to have a cure for your pain, but as you lie there, you feel a new symptom come on. Self-doubt gout. You think, Why are others better than me at enduring the pain it takes to do big shit? They probably don't need a pill. They probably just push through it. You start to convince yourself that you're just wired differently. Duh. You're not as smart, as disciplined, or as gifted as they are. You start to laugh at yourself and wonder, did I ever think that I could actually do what they do? I'm just not meant for things that big. You reflect on all that dreaming and work and discipline you've been doing, and in an instant, you feel like a pomodork. The energy and excitement you once had to go for the big job or start your own company, host a great party, invent a new product, lead something big at your company was just that, a dream. A few minutes later, you feel a huge wave of something half exhausting, half relieving pass over you. Finish fatigue. You quickly notice it. You felt this before, but this time you don't fight it. You recognize that your finish fatigue is just too much to overcome. Maybe you could bust through it if you were still 23, if you didn't work 60 hours a week, if you didn't have two little ones, if you weren't married, if you didn't have a mortgage and car payments and a never-ending adulting list. But nope, you're running too hard. Your cramps, calluses, pain, and gout make it impossible to conceive how you could possibly fight through finish fatigue. Finally, as you lie in bed, a pint of chocolate ice cream in one hand and a TV remote in the other, your dreams of being a pioneer in this world die. Pioneer paralysis shows up like Glinda, the good witch in The Wizard of Oz. She gently takes the spoon out of your hand and does a little tap-tap on your forehead. Not hard, light, like Glinda did for Dorothy. Pioneer paralysis calms you down and then gives you the sweet little permission to return to your warm, cozy comfort zone. Your version of Kansas. The place that feels just right for someone who's just not meant to be a big city folk. Someone who is supposed to be in Kansas. Someone who is okay with just good enough. Because you've seen what it takes to be great. And man, oh man, you are just not cut out for that. There's just too much running and pain and disease outside of home. This is the cycle of sleeprunning syndrome. Hey guys, Erin here, and I have some exciting news. So I have been working on my second book, The 50% Rule, for the last few years, and it's now available for pre-order. Here's the truth. I am totally obsessed with this book. And the reasons are, first, because of the rule. The rule completely has changed my life. I use it on freaking everything. And I've used it helping countless others. So the rule is tested. It is powerful. I've been using it for 5 years. But honestly, that probably wouldn't have been enough to write a book about it. It would have gotten kind of boring. What actually happened is, over the last couple of years, what I started to see was that this rule was actually the secret, the backbone, the formula for so many people's success, like famous people and things and companies like Hamilton and John Madden and Weird Al Yankovic and the Savannah Bananas and Shopify and all these. And so what happened is I realized that this rule isn't just, a self-help rule to get over your problems, which is where it started, but it's actually the thing that can help you go from underdog to unmatched. And I've seen it with many others. So I tell a bazillion stories in there. There's advice, there's research, there's, of course, snarky wit, and a little salty language, of course. I'd say it's sort of like a Malcolm Gladwell meets Jen Sincero book. So to get your copy of the 50% Rule, so you don't forget, I know it's kind of weird, pre-order, but you can do that now. You can just head over to Amazon and look for the 50% Rule, or you can check it out in the show notes below. Can't wait to share the rule with you. Hey, it's Erin with a teeny request. If you have ever gotten any value from this podcast and you'd like us to stick around, plus you want it to continue to grow so we can kind of swindle bigger and more knowledgeable guests to join us,
and to keep providing you with tangible and inspiring actions you can take to achieve the career and life you deserve, could you please just take 1 minute to leave us a rating and a review? Those reviews go a long way in attracting guests to the show, and candidly, they really make Nicole and I's day. We see you. We really do. So when you have the time and inspiration, we'd love to see a rating and review from you. Thank you.